On the part that's the other part, which is a Greensboro bill, I did not know much about Greensboro's governing body until now. I expect many of you didn't either. I feel it is very important that I share with you some of the history so you will be able to understand why citizens asked Senator Wade to help the people have fairer representation, and she did file her bill. I have talked to many citizens in Greensboro and learned what I am going to share with you now. Since 1968, and probably before, there have been 4 referendums trying to get a district system, and none have passed. The only referendum that passed was in 1972 that made all 6 members of the Greensboro City Council and the mayor at large members, and it was put into law. In 1982, the City Council wanted to annex property. But because of the Voting Rights Act, the Justice Department told the council that they would have to come up with a redistricting plan. A 40-member Greensboro Dialogue Task Force was formed. They came up with a plan for 6 district members plus 3 at large and the mayor at large. And they had a referendum. And of course, it failed. A compromise of 5 district members plus 3 at large and the mayor at large was negotiated, and the city council body did this as an ordinance in a council meeting. In the past 33 years, only one African American has won an at-large seat. This is Yvonne Johnson. She has become mayor, and she has been a councilwoman, and she is still on the council. This form of government is exactly what they have now, with 5 district members, 3 at large, and the mayor at large. After 33 years, this is the same thing. The present city council has 4 members, plus the mayor, who live within a 2-mile geographic radius in the downtown area, with 4 at-large members, including the mayor. In the past, in the same area, council members have lived across the street from each other, and even in one instance in the same house. And that could still happen today because that hasn't changed. This bill would rectify this inequality of representation. With 7 districts and 1 vote for each council member, the voters will have the same voice as the citizens in the House and Senate districts, as well as the congressional districts. In recent sessions, the Guilford County Board of Commissioners and the Guilford County School Board have been redistricted without a referendum. Where was the request for referendums then? Where was the City Council then? Do you really think all citizens of Greensboro are getting equal representation? Do you want this form of government for the next 33 years? I hope this information has shown you the unfairness of the form of government. With the passing of this bill, the form of government can be changed after 2020 if it doesn't work for the people. House Bill 263 needs to pass without a referendum and give all citizens of the city of Greensboro the fair and equal representation. I respectfully ask that you vote green to concur. This bill does not affect the present city council except for the filing date. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Guilford, Representative Harrison, rise?
To debate the motion.
The lady has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I wanted to argue against this motion both on procedural and substantive grounds. It's no surprise that this proposal to redistrict the city of Greensboro that's been added by the Senate to Representative Hurley's bill on redistricting Trinity is highly controversial back home and not at all not at all popular. It's there's a separate vehicle, Senate Bill 36, that currently resides in the House Elections Committee, and that's where this issue ought to be debated. This House has not had the opportunity to debate or deliberate this very controversial proposal. The Senate, as Representative Hurley has mentioned, the Senate additions have proposed some major changes to the way this Greensboro City Council districts are drawn. It eliminates at-large members. It combines 4 members into 1 district. It removes the mayor's vote. It removes Greensboro's right to self-determine the way it has its own city council formed. It also raises potential constitutional issues because there's deviation, nearly 10% deviation between the districts in terms of population. The House members representing 99.9% of the Greensboro voters are united in opposition to this proposal. We all believe that there ought to be a referendum by the citizens of Greensboro to decide how their city council ought to be constituted. This is something that we gave the city of High Point a couple of years ago. This is just fundamentally important to the citizens of Greensboro that they have the right to have a referendum on how their city government is constituted. I did want to respond to Representative Hurley's comment about the county commissioners redistricting and the Board of Education redistricting. That was something that we had fought for, to have a referendum requirement. It was not approved by the Senate conferee, so we weren't able to push that, but that was something that citizens wanted back home. So I urge you to vote to not concur. Vote red.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Johnson, rise?
I'd like to ask the bill sponsor a question.
Does the lady from Randolph yield to the gentleman from Guilford?
I do.
She yields.
Yes. What is the population of Trinity?
Trinity, 6,000, about 6,800 people.
Okay, I want to speak to the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
And this is no disrespect to Representative Hurley, but adding this bill is like trying to fit a size 10 foot in a size 5 shoe. It doesn't fit. The population of Greensboro is 285,000. The population of Trinity is just a little over 6,000. The city of Greensboro does not have an issue with Trinity. I want to make that real clear. We have no issue with Trinity. Trinity is our neighbor. The citizens of Greensboro just want the opportunity to vote on their own bill. Just give them a chance, that's all. This is not something that we want to happen, and the citizens don't want this to happen. The city of Trinity is planning to reduce their council from 7 to 5. That's their right. Representative Hurley is representing her constituents. We are too. That's what we're doing. Even though we are 40 times the size of Trinity, some folks will say that they want to reduce the council. But I haven't heard a whole lot of outcry for this to happen. Just imagine if the lawmakers here in Raleigh decide to redistrict your city council or your county commission. How would you feel about that? Many conservatives that reside in Greensboro and Guilford County, including the current sheriff, B.J. Barnes, former U.S. House Representative Howard Coble, the governor, Pat McCrory, who was from Guilford County, all indicated that the original bill, Senate Bill 36, which is now 263, shouldn't happen. The sponsor of Senate Bill 36 has done one thing. She's united Greensboro, both Democrats and Republicans. She's done that, and we thank her for that. I have not heard an outcry from all the talk about redistricting or reconfiguring our city council. The statements that were made that business leaders were afraid to say anything is not true. I know of 2 business leaders that are in Greensboro that are totally against this bill. One of those individuals I just laid on your desk, Mr. Roy Carroll, who is a developer in Greensboro, whose company, the Carroll Companies, contribute millions of dollars to our economy in Greensboro. Millions. His company also, he also owns a conservative newspaper called the Rhinoceros Times. And I don't think that Mr. Carroll is shy about giving his feelings. I'm 100% sure of that. He'll tell you how he feels. Another one is Marty Cotis, who's another developer, who also contributes millions of dollars to our economy. These individuals are very opinionated, and they have no reason to say that they're not for this bill. If it's such a good bill, they have no reason. But as I indicated, one thing that she's done, and I'm speaking about Senator Wade, has united Greensboro. And I really hope that you will decide not to concur on this bill. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Hardister, rise?
To debate the motion.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I live in Greensboro. I think I have a pretty good frame of reference as to how people feel about this. I can tell you that there's been a lot of negative pushback. I've talked to a lot of people in the community who do not support this, both Republican and Democrat. Personally, I'm not convinced that this is a good plan. I think there may be some virtue to changing the structure of the City Council, but I've studied it, I've thought about it. I'm really not convinced that this is the right way to go. I'd say the feedback that I've gotten, and I'm not exaggerating, I'd say it's been about 40-to-1 negative. 40-to-1 negative. I like to think I'm fairly active in my community. I go to the supermarket, to the grocery store, to the gas station. People stop me, both Republican and Democrat. They don't feel good about this bill. And I'd remind you that out of the 6 members in this chamber who are from Guilford County, 5 out of 6 do not support this bill. I think the right thing to do is to vote this motion down, send it to conference, and we'll work it out. And either we can put a referendum on the changes to the Greensboro City Council, or else we can amend it and come up with a compromise. But at this point in time, I cannot support this. I think it's wrong. And I do nothing but ask you to vote your conscience, but I do hope that you'll vote no on the motion to concur.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Brockman, rise?
To ask the bill sponsor a question.
Does the lady from Randolph yield to the gentleman from Guilford?
I do.
She yields.
Representative Hurley, have you or do you have ever represented Greensboro?
No, I have never lived in Greensboro. But
Have you ever been to a town hall?
Does the gentleman wish to ask an additional question?
Yes, sir.
And does the lady yield to an additional question? Does the lady yield to an additional question?
I have, yes.
She yields.
Have you ever been to a town hall in Greensboro
Several town hall meetings,
about
but
this
not in
issue,
Greensboro.
Senate Bill 36?
I have been to several town hall meetings.
On the Senate Bill in Greensboro about Senate Bill?
Does the gentleman wish to ask an additional question?
Yeah, yes.
And does the lady yield to an additional question?
I do.
She yields.
Have you ever been to a town hall in Greensboro on Senate Bill 36?
No, sir.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from,
Can I ask John Bless a question?
does Representative Blush, the gentleman from Guilford, yield to Representative
yield.
Brockman? He yields.
Representative Bless, do you represent Greensboro?
I represent the northwest portion of the city of Greensboro, yes.
And have you been to any town halls can I ask John Bless another question?
Does the gentleman yield to an additional
Yes.
question? He
Have
yields.
you been to any town halls about Senate Bill 36 in Greensboro?
I've been to town halls, that's correct.
And are you
Does the
supporting,
gentleman wish to ask an additional question?
supporting the bill?
Does the
Are-
gentleman,
Can I
Representative
ask-
Brockman,
ask additional
Representative
question?
Brockman, the gentleman will suspend. When the gentleman wishes to propose a question, the
Yes.
chair will recognize, and then the protocol is that the other gentleman to whom the question is directed is given a chance as to whether he does or does not yield.
My apologies, Mr.
So,
Speaker.
does the gentleman wish to ask an additional question?
Yes.
And does the gentleman from Guilford yield?
Yes.
He yields.
And are you supporting this bill, Representative Bless?
I don't support this motion to concur in House Bill 263, no.
Thank you. Can I speak on the bill?
The gentleman from Guilford has the floor to debate the bill.
This, to me, this whole process seems to be a little bit foreign to me. I thought when we did local bills, we actually listened to the local folks in the bills where the folks, the representatives, actually represented it. Representative Harster has already explained to this body that 5 out of the 6 folks who actually represent Greensboro are against this bill. And yet still we are really fighting for the citizens of Greensboro just to have a voice. And that to me seems very wrong, and it should make everybody in this body feel wrong that we have a local bill that 5 out of the 6 members here in this body from Greensboro who actually represent Greensboro, who've been to the town halls, are against. And yet we're sitting here and we're debating this bill, and that to me is wrong. We all made an oath to the citizens of North Carolina. We did not make an oath to Representative Hurley, who is a very honorable representative and is somebody who we all respect. But we did not make an oath to Representative Hurley. We made an oath to the citizens of Greensboro. And I ask that all of the members of this body stick to that oath and ask for the citizens of Greensboro to have a voice. Representative Howard Coble, Sheriff B.J. Barnes of Greensboro would like a voice. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Carteret, Representative McKellar, after us?
To speak on the motion.
Lady has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I wasn't going to say anything, but we started talking about who represents whom. And if you understand Senate Bill 36, it was done by the senator from that area, not by Representative Hurley, but by the senator from that area. So I do believe she's been to a few town board meetings. She understands the issue. When I talked to her about this, she said, I'm trying to help a group of people who have been begging for representation. When it goes to referendum and you have the whole, then you're not going to have one group of people have the representation. You know, I heard that argument over here many times about the marriage amendment, that you're not getting representation from the minority because you got the majority voting. When you have a town council that's not in districts, it is a very unfair town council or a county council. These people need representation in each of these areas, even if they're in the minority. I beg you to consider that this is a senator from Greensboro's bill that Representative Hurley's having to defend. Consider that she represents that group of people that are begging and have begged for years to have representation. Also, I find it very interesting that we did pass some other Greensboro bills without a referendum, because referendums in Greensboro are not working because the majority continues to rule and the minority has no voice. Please concur with this motion.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Faircloth, rise?
To debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The motion. This is not an easy piece of legislation to work with. You all know that. We've heard a lot about it the last few weeks, and it's been called every kind of name in the world, particularly by the local newspaper in Greensboro, which has done about 125 articles on this. The newspaper even sold T-shirts against this bill. Very powerful group lobbying against this bill at home. That's fine. That's what people have a right to do. And there are people in Greensboro who are certainly against this bill. But there are people in Greensboro who are in favor of it. Particularly two that I know quite well are two of the former Republican mayors in Greensboro. They're both very much in favor of it. It was said that the sheriff of Guilford County, B.J. Barnes, was against the bill. As I recall hearing what the sheriff said, he said that he wasn't necessarily against the bill. He would just rather have a referendum. And that question has come up several times, and some of the representatives in this room have taken that position. They didn't say they were necessarily against the bill, but they would rather have a referendum. Everyone has a choice to make in this if you choose to vote, and I hope you will. It does not, I first of all only represent a small part of Greensboro. I've got about 200 or so voters that I represent there. So I'm in the great minority as far as representing Greensboro. But I grew up in Greensboro, spent most of my life there. It's a wonderful, wonderful city, and it deserves the very best representation it can have for its people. And what it has now is a group of five out of 9, who live in a circle with about a 2-mile diameter in a city of 285,000 people. Now, geographically, my small granddaughter could look at that and see that's not really fair. It's a picture. If you look at the map, it's a picture with a little circle where 5 of the office holders live. Those 5 can make all the decisions for Greensboro. They don't need the other 4. What the senator has proposed with this particular bill is to change Greensboro's geographic pattern so that each part of the city has a representative. And those 7 representatives would make up the voting block for the city, 1 from each of the parts of the city, and the mayor would in fact be the policy manager for the city. The mayor would not be one of just the voters. The mayor would be the policy manager, the one that guides the thinking, sort of like our speaker does here in the House. Very seldom do we see the speaker vote, but he certainly influences what we do. That would be the job of the mayor under this particular situation. I don't think anybody should find fault with Senator Wade for bringing this bill forward, because she had the same right that you have in serving the people that you serve to bring forth legislation. Doesn't mean you agree with it. Doesn't mean that some citizens agree with it. Also doesn't mean there aren't some citizens that do agree with it. So it's a hard decision that we have to make here. The motion is to concur with this. If you concur, we move forward. Greensboro gets a new council, a new map with representation spread across the city, and 4 years, or about 5 years, to decide whether or not that worked. And if it doesn't work, the city council will then have the power to change it. Greensboro hasn't changed much since 1982 in terms of its council. And the folks that are asking for this in Greensboro just want a chance to be represented appropriately. I know you have all thought long and hard about this. I know you've been lobbied hard. I think every person in here, when we talk about voting our conscience, that this one fits that very well. Please give credit where credit is due. Please find fault where fault should be found. Vote your conscience, but let's get this over and move on.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Blust, rise?
To speak on the motion.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. I'm disappointed in this motion. I had been led to understand that the motion would be to not concur, and we'd have a quick vote and get out and be done with it, go to conference. And so I don't understand why this was the motion made, but I would ask you to vote no to the motion for several reasons, primarily for this. All 5 members of this House, or 4 members of this House who live in Greensboro, are asking you not to concur. The people who live there, work there, drive around, know the community the best, are asking you not to concur, and this, unfortunately, is far more of a Greensboro bill than a Trinity bill. You've got a bill that was a little town's bill that went over to the Senate, and they put this bill for Greensboro, a big city, into that bill and are attempting to run it through for the sole purpose of denying those of us who represent that city, the city of Greensboro, in this chamber and are responsible to those voters. They are trying to deny us a vote in any detail on this bill. And I don't begrudge anyone filing a bill who's in the Senate, who represents that area. Yeah, they can file it, but our constitutional system is for 2 houses. And if you vote to concur, if you hit that green button on this motion, you are saying, folks in Greensboro, your House members do not get a say in this. We're not going to let them have any effect on the details of this bill, and you all know it is wrong for a city of 285,000 to have a form of government put in place by one person. One person did the design. One person insists that every detail of that one person's design be preserved by cutting out the House members. That is not doing your job to protect your chamber. So I'm very disappointed that this method was chosen when we have had House Bill or Senate Bill 36 over here. That is the Greensboro bill. We can still move it forward. Now, and I'm sorry to have to be speaking. I wasn't going to speak on a motion to not concur, but there's several things that need to be addressed here. One is the merits of the bill. Now, I was not consulted, nor was, I don't think, any House member when the bill was filed, but it became very controversial in Greensboro. Now, if the support's there for it, as some suggest, what better way to find out if that support is majority support than a secret ballot? That shouldn't be revolutionary. So I think it's a little bit of a contradiction for people to argue there's support there, but a referendum would never pass. Now, that's self-contradictory, I think you can see from your face, but once I did start looking at the details, and I did go to several forums, I've gotten thousands of contacts on this. I've asked several people privately from different persuasions, privately and in confidence, do you support it? I have not found that much support. There is some, but not that much. So I feel like I'm being generous in supporting it at all with a referendum. And we had counted votes. House Bill or Senate Bill 36 had enough votes that it was going to be put to a referendum. So this whole idea of putting it on Representative Hurley's bill was concocted to cut us out from being able to run that very important amendment to Senate Bill 36. Now, one reason when I looked at the merits of the bill, when it finally came to the House, and after listening to people, I think I can sum up in a short passage from the Bible. I notice many people in here make reference to it in debate, and Representative Pierce just on Thursday did. And I want to read a short passage that I think says it better, illustrates the point better than I can say. This comes from Luke 14, starting at verse 28. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh out against him with 20,000? So when I looked at this whole situation, looked at the bill, and counted the cost, the benefits of this bill purportedly in the form of better government don't come anywhere near the cost of the bill. Now, the better government you get, you would be replacing a system that I found no big outcry to fix. It's been in place for several years, where several people in a common thread that I've heard from said, look, each one of us in Greensboro gets to vote on election day for a majority of our council. We get 3 at-large and a mayor and a district vote. So every citizen has more voting power. Now, whether that's correct or not, I think, at least if that's going to be changed, the people should have a say in that. That's why I support a referendum. But the cost of this thing, if you hit that green button and this becomes the law, and this government, this setup, whether good or bad, what this setup is imposed on the city of Greensboro, the cost of this is going to be a lot of outrage in the community that's going to last for a long time. It's going to subject us to the charge that here you are, this legislature, meddling in the local affairs, once again, forcing things locally. I thought you were for local government and self-control. And the cost to us in a political hit that's going to be true this time, because we get accused of a lot of things falsely. Those of us in the majority, you know that. This time it's going to be true. And you will have forced a certain structure that every jot and every tittle was designed by one person on 285,000 people. And I ask you, is that right? Is it right to allow this kind of tactic to be used by the other chamber? And if you keep doing it now, they're going to keep doing it. And I'm a little bit disappointed, but there's not more. Well, I'm disappointed that the other chamber would do something like this. But I'd be more disappointed if we just allow them. And I wonder sometimes why we aren't more circumspect with how we do the public's business. And I recall a story by Dr. Vance Havner one time. He went with some people to a restaurant that was very dark. And he was telling the story and relating how they were almost stumbling over other tables to get to their table, and they sat down and the host handed them the menus, and they were thinking, how in the world are we ever going to be able to see the menu and able to order? And the host said, your waiter will be with you in a minute. And sure enough, by the time the waiter came a short time later, their eyes had adjusted a little bit and they could see the menu, even in the dimness. And Dr. Havner said he blurted this out and didn't realize until just after he said it, until exactly how profound the statement it was. But he said, isn't it amazing how quick you can get used to the dark? And we come down here and we see the way things are done. People come with the greatest of intentions and they think, well, they've done this on this bill and that bill and the other bill. And for those reasons, for the reasons that, one, I don't think it's necessarily a good plan, but if the folks want it, all these arguments in favor of the great provisions of this proposal can be made in a campaign, and the people can vote to choose the form of government that they want. I've looked up the statute. Every other city, sure, there's the power of this chamber to do it, but this legislature has given the municipalities a broad map within which constraints they can choose their form of local government. We haven't interfered, I don't think, in many others. We shouldn't do it now. This should be up to the people of Greensboro, whether I like their choices or not, because for me, the reason there's not going to be any improvement, I think you're going to be just I hope with the indulgence of the other side, to me this is going to be replacing one group of liberals running Greensboro with another group of liberals with no gain.
Representative Bluff, the gentleman's time has expired.
Okay. With no gain, so please vote no.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the passage of the motion to concur to House Bill 263. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 35 having voted in the affirmative and 73 in the negative. The motion to concur fails. The lady from Randolph, Representative Hurley, is recognized for a motion.
I move that we not concur.
The lady from Randolph has moved that the House do not concur to House Bill 263. Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the passage of the motion not to concur. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open a vote. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 108 having voted in the affirmative and none in the negative. The motion not to concur is adopted. The Senate will be so notified. The chair will appoint conferees, perhaps this evening, perhaps later.